"There's no room," my daughter-in-law said, and shut my own front door on me like a book that bored her. The bolt slid home. On Christmas Eve, the snow had that tight squeak it makes when the cold is honest. I stood on the porch holding a casserole that still believed in warmth and a paper bag of tangerines I'd saved from the good box at the pantry. Through the window I could see the tree I paid for with last year's winter gas savings, white lights, not blinking, because I don't like my holidays to stutter. My son Daniel didn't come to the door. He never does when decisions dress themselves up as logistics. Inside, someone laughed. Melissa, his wife, has a laugh you hear in recipes that call for too much salt. "No room?" I said to the wood. "Or no use?" The wind answered for them, shouldering me off the mat. I've lived long enough to know humiliation has temperature. Across the street, Mrs. Green's porch light snapped on. She's a retired librarian with a jaw like a good stapler. The light stayed on long enough for me to feel seen. Not rescued, witnessed. There's a difference. I set the casserole on the step because I am old, not clumsy, and pulled my gloves from my pocket the way women do when they refuse to let their hands learn bitterness. A child's shadow leapt behind the drapes, my granddaughter, Eliza, then vanished as if someone pressed her down gently by the shoulders. The bell camera blinked red. I rang it once, then leaned close so its little glass eye could swallow the facts. "May Carter," I said, my voice steady. "Owner of record at this address. It's December 24th. I've been denied entry to my home." Inside, Melissa's voice, sweet on top, sharp underneath. "Stop performing for the street, May. We're at capacity. We can't have you underfoot. It's a fire hazard." "Your attitude," and pointed at a folder on the hall table, neighborhood watch, phone numbers. Under their card, a name I didn't expect. Green, Lydia, Notary Public, retired. Municipal Clerk, retired. People retire from jobs. They don't retire from verbs. Lydia kept copies of your block's deeds for decades, Harold said, already dialing. Paper forgets in one place. It remembers somewhere else. "Let's not wait on memory," Lydia said, tapping her phone. "Recording light is a gift from the Lord. We'll pull the doorbell footage and send it to the right inboxes." She texted Officer Kinley, the beat cop who eats pie at Gina's and never lets his coffee get cold enough to excuse indifference, and Inspector Kwan from Housing, who knows the sound a bad lock makes when it learns its time is up. It was Christmas Eve. I expected voicemail. Both replied in under 5 minutes. "On my way," and "Document everything or Carol's too if you've lived long enough." "Do you want to sit?" Lydia asked. "No," I said. "I want to stand where I can see my front door from your window." We did. 2 old women in sensible shoes behind lace curtains, watching a house that pretended it didn't know me. Across the street, shadows moved like choreography. The trees' lights held their breaths. Somewhere a phone pinged. Lies often arrive with cheerful sounds. "He did this as a boy," I heard myself say, surprised at how calm I sounded. When he was 8 and didn't want to come home, he'd hide behind the camellia and wait for me to call his name twice. Once for anger, once for forgiveness. He'd come on the second. She's taught him there's a third option now. Embarrassment. Lydia made a small noise that could sharpen scissors. "Embarrassment never made a home," she said, "but it has torn down more rooms than termites." We printed the screenshots Mrs. Green had coaxed out of the doorbell account while Kinley parked under the streetlight like a promise. He knocked, not me. Melissa opened. "Names are furnaces if you let them be." Kinley nodded. "Ma'am," he said to Melissa, "open the door for your landlord." "Don't call her that," Melissa snapped, then went pale because she'd heard herself invent a truth she didn't like. I didn't step forward. Not yet. "I'm making a record," I said, and turned back toward Mrs. Green's warm window.
On Christmas Eve, my family said there was no room in the house where my name is on the deed. The neighbors opened their door. The city answered. Tomorrow, the paper will too. Lydia smiled without showing teeth. You'll stay here tonight, she said. You'll bring the casserole. We'll set another place. Tomorrow, you'll call the clinic lawyer. This is not a battle. It is housekeeping. Across the street, the porch light flicked off and on and off. Daniel's old signal when he couldn't say what he should say out loud. I let the light blink twice and then stop. I didn't move. Some lessons need the dark to develop. I sat at Mrs. Green's table, broke bread that didn't apologize, and wrote a list on yellow paper. Onload doorbell footage. Tim summary to Kinley, copy Inspector Kwan. All legal aid, Miss Patel, false imprisonment, access denial. Slashing the spare key Lydia swears she hid from me in 1999. Outside, snow kept its appointment. Inside, the clock ticked like punctuation. Tomorrow would be Christmas Day. We would open boxes. Mine would be file folders. They said there was no room. I'm about to rearrange the house. Christmas morning. The snow softened into that quiet that makes even bad decisions sound polite. Lydia brewed coffee that could stand up by itself and set the casserole in her oven like it had always meant to arrive next door. Harold laid out 2 legal pads, 3 pens, and a roll of tape. Paper first, he said. Feelings later. We downloaded the doorbell footage, timestamp glowing true, my voice clear, Melissa's no room, crisp as eyes that had figured out the cost of sleep. Mom, he started. Unlock the deadbolt, I said. You can be kind without underlining it. He did. Kinley watched the chain jangling like a guilty thought, and then we were inside. The tree flickered once, twice, remembered itself, and steadied. Keys, Lydia said, palm open like a sacrament. Melissa laughed, then stopped. Daniel took his ring off and put it on Lydia's hand. Habits die harder when a former municipal clerk stares at you over bifocals. Melissa hesitated, then surrendered hers like the metal had teeth. Kinley wrote, "Keys surrendered," in his notebook, drew a small box, checked it. Paper can be a lullaby when it's doing the right thing. In my front hall, Lydia taped a photocopy of the deed at eye level and underlined my name with a pen heavy enough to sign ships. In case memory needs help reading, she said. She taped the printed still of Melissa saying, "No room," beside it. Exhibit A in my own entryway. We walked the rooms. I put my hand on my dresser, my table, the bowl that has always held tangerines like a blessing. Lydia ticked boxes on a sheet titled Re-Entry Inventory. Under Hall Closet, she wrote, "Bell removed," and drew a smiley face with horns. "We don't live with bells anymore," she murmured. Back at Lydia's table, after we fed each other with things casseroles can't fix, I called Miss Patel at the clinic from my new habit of not apologizing for needing her on holidays. Illegal lockout, I said. Denial of access, filmed. Door opened only after police arrived. "Good morning, May," she said, voice already turning verbs into scaffolds. "We'll file a temporary restraining order. No locks, no refusal, no retaliation. We can do it on an emergency basis, even today if a judge is on call. Also police authorized to enforce." I forwarded the order to Daniel. He read it, standing in the kitchen like a boy who finally found the test stapled to his heart. He looked up. "I'm sorry," he said. He didn't try to decorate it. "Good," I answered. "Here are your verbs. Return, repair, respect. Pick 2 today. Learn the 3rd by New Year's." Melissa hovered like a word that hadn't learned its part of the sentence yet. "You didn't have to make it public," she said. "You did that," I said,
and nodded at the camera still blinking the truth. I'm just filing it. At 4, the locksmith arrived. The good one Lydia recommends because he doesn't make speeches while he changes your life. He rekeyed both doors, handed me a tidy ring, and logged serials on an invoice I placed in a folder titled Keys, Who and When. I gave Daniel a spare. I didn't give Melissa one. The TRO liked that choice. We ate Lydia's tangerines and my casserole and let the afternoon decide when it wanted to stop being holy. The tree across the street glowed like a room that had learned restraint. As we washed dishes, the bell camera blinked again, this time to capture a grandmother returning through her own door without asking permission. A policeman disappearing into weather. A neighbor closing her file but leaving the light on. Tomorrow, Ms. Patel will file the permanent order. Kwan will staple his photo to a case file where policies learn names. Kinley will add a line to the elder safety bulletin. Doorbells can be witnesses. I'll make copies and tapes and labels. Christmas gifts come wrapped in paper. So do boundaries. I put my keys on a hook that says home and listen to them settle. Room enough, I told the house, and the house said amen with its hinges. The day after Christmas wears a hangover even for people who don't drink. I woke to the sound of my keys settling on the... If someone says no room and the weather says below freezing, patrol treats it as elder endangerment. He slid a copy under my magnet that says, Lists are love. Inspector Kwan came in his city parka, tape measure poking out like a pen that prefers numbers. He wrote an access and heat notice and posted it on my fridge. Thermostat temps, heater maintenance, no disabling vents, and all residents guaranteed use of kitchen and bathroom. Policy on paper makes kitchens behave, he said, and my stove practically preened. At 10, Lydia did what librarians do best, organized the neighborhood. She fired up the block's phone tree with a message that was both sermon and memo. We do not lock elders out. If you see it, you say it. If you have room, you make it. By noon, casseroles gathered on my counter like soldiers reporting for duty. Mrs. Green, 2 doors down, brought salt for the steps, a metaphor that tried too hard and still made me cry. I texted Daniel the order and the plan. He replied, Mom, can we talk? Alone? We sat at my kitchen table where utensils have always been honest. He put his hands on the wood, not clenched, not empty. I let her decide the whole story, he said quietly. I'm not going to do that anymore. Then here are the nouns, I said, sliding a single page across. House rules and access plan. Kitchen is common. Bathroom is not a bargaining chip. My bed is not a staging area. My door opens when I touch it, for me or for the person I say. Guests do not outrank owners. He read, lips moving. I agree, he said. He signed. I put the sheet in a sleeve labeled Rules Signed and felt my spine push its shoulders back. Melissa came in from the porch like weather that hadn't checked the forecast. Are we done making a spectacle? She asked, performing bravado for a room. We served copies, one to Melissa's email, read receipt requested, one to Daniel's hands, one to the fridge because kitchens need to learn law like recipes. Lydia, never one to waste an audience, posted a porch pledge on the block group. We open our doors before we open our mouths. We call if we see a lock and a coat at the same time. Learn who holds the deed on our street. 37 neighbors typed yes in winter mittens. At dusk, we hosted what Lydia called a quiet Christmas do-over. No tree theatrics, just neighbors with thermoses and tamales and the kind of laughter that knows when to stop. Gina sent rolls and a pot of soup that forgave the day.
Pastor Ruth said a blessing that fit in one sentence. Kinley leaned by the door, present without pressing. Quan warmed his hands around a mug and asked who could use weather stripping before the next storm. Paper had done its morning work. People did the rest. When the last dish found its cupboard, Daniel lingered. "I'll get a hotel for a few days," he said. "Give you space." "You'll bring in salt when the steps freeze," I said. "You'll take Melissa to her mother's. You'll come back with verbs." He nodded. That's a thing I'm learning about men who are trying again. They nod when words would spoil it. Before bed, I moved the bell from Lydia's folder to a shelf where I keep relics I respect but will not repeat. I stood in the hall between the deed and the still and whispered, "Room enough." The house breathed like a ship that has decided to aim for shore. Tomorrow, Nia will mail certified copies. The councilwoman will draft. The block will keep its pledge. And if anyone tries no room again within earshot, a dozen porches will light up like policy. Christmas turns out to be an excellent day to rearrange a house. 2 days after Christmas, winter remembered its job again. The cold came back with teeth, the kind that tests door seals and people's promises. I was labeled. She did mark malicious reports suspected. Before she left, she read the line on my fridge. "Owner may enter and exit her dwelling at will," and smiled like someone who sees a good sentence and appreciates the workmanship. "If there's another call," she said, "I'll flag it. Stay warm." 5 minutes later, Inspector Quan appeared with a pocket infrared reader like a toy that saves lives. "Heard APS rolled," he said. "Figured we'll make it a twofer." He scanned vents. We watched ghost heat glow modest on the little screen. He pointed to the smart thermostat app on Daniel's phone. "No more eco mode at midnight," he said. "Ordinance says 68 minimum when it's below freezing. Smart doesn't excuse mean." Daniel flushed, caught, then corrected. "Yes, sir," he said, and set the schedule where policy keeps it. At noon, Melissa tried the internet. A post about toxic matriarchs and weaponized holidays, a carousel of photos cropped to avoid showing the deed copy taped in my hall. Trust and Safety did what training had taught them. Gray sash, restricted for ongoing safety review. Officer Kinley texted, "Screenshotted. If she tries it again, we can hang contempt on the hook you gave us." I made tea and added screenshots, social, to a sleeve I didn't expect to need and now love for its efficiency. That evening, Lydia marched across with a canvas tote labeled Porch Kit. Blanket, hand warmers, thermos, spare gloves, printed neighbors' numbers, she said. "Every house on the block gets one. We're done improvising compassion." We set mine by the door under the welcome mat that lies less convincingly than it used to. The next morning, Councilwoman Ortiz called. "We moved your cold weather access ordinance up for a special session," she said. 2 minutes, May, then policy." I took my yellow pad and wrote 4 lines. Below freezing is not a debate. Blackmail are witnesses. Aggress is a verb. Daniel stopped at Gina's for 2 bowls of soup for Ordinance Day. He set them on my table like a peace offering and stared at the laminated house rules and access plan on the fridge. "I didn't realize rules could be kindness," he said. "They are when everyone follows them," I replied. "They're just loud when people don't." New Year's Eve tried to stage a sequel. Melissa floated the idea of a small gathering, 12 RSVPs and a rented speaker. Permanent injunction reads, "No events interfering with owner's peace." Officer Reyes read it over the phone in a voice that suggests patrol stroll by when speakers get ideas. She canceled in a story that said weather and learned a new lesson. Silence can be policy too. At midnight, Lydia and Harold came over with 2 paper cups and a bottle of something that fizzed politely. We stood at my open door, watched the snow hold its breath, and listened to the neighborhood ring the new year with spoons instead of sirens. Daniel texted a photo of the thermostat, 68. I replied with a thumbs up and a period, because some sentences don't need more. On New Year's Day, I taught the paper is a door class at the clinic, holiday edition. We passed around photocopies of the Cold Weather Access Ordinance and the one-page Winter House Rights sheet Quan and Nia drafted. People underlined, owner may enter and exit at will, like they were memorizing a psalm. A woman named Odette whispered, I thought it was just my family. I said, it never is, and handed her a porch kit with hand warmers and the list of doorbell downloads. That afternoon, a plain envelope slid under my door, Melissa's handwriting inside, rounder than truth. Consider this a truce. I won't post about you. You stop making everything public. I wrote one line beneath hers and slid it back under. Truce requires verbs: comply, repair, respect. I'll keep filing. I taped the ordinance beside the deed and the still of her no room. Hallway.
Lydia wrote it on her calendar with a pen that doesn't do pencil. At 9, APS called back. Same worker. Same wool hat in my mind. We flagged the report as malicious, she said. Submitting for a civil penalty and training module, false reports in elder cases. She paused. We're using your fridge photo in orientation. The line, owner may enter and exit at will, it's clean. Verbs matter, I said. She laughed the way people do when a kind sentence lands where it belongs. Inspector Quan swung by with a roll of weather stripping and a stapled packet. Cold Weather Access Ordinance, Plain Language Guide. He'd circled my favorite lines in pencil, like a teacher making sure the student sees what's important. Below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, patrol may compel access. Fines accrue per hour of denial. Thermostat, 68 degrees Fahrenheit minimum. He taped a copy inside my hall closet. Emergencies don't wait for Wi-Fi, he said. Officer Kinley came with cocoa and a laminator he borrowed from Lydia. We're making door hangers for elderly residents, he said, laying out bright cards that read on one side, this home is occupied by an elder. Access is a right. And on the other, if lockout suspected, call, with his precinct's number. Do you want the first one? Make it 2, I said, and hung one by the front door and the other on the back. Keys are policy in metal. Door hangers are policy in cardboard. By noon, Lydia had organized a keys and cocoa hour at the fellowship hall. Duplicate keys made on a little machine that sounded like a polite beaver. Hot chocolate with marshmallows that refused to judge. We labeled envelopes: May, Kinley, Odette, Nia, Alonzo, Ruth. Neighbor custodians who know where the deeds live. Someone brought a box of those rubber keycaps. He wrote a number large enough to feel like a lesson, and small enough to fit in a trek book. $2,000 fine for illegal lockout below freezing. $500 for thermostat non-compliance, training required. Cold weather access, APS false reports, and, because Quan requested it, egress basics. Daniel squeezed the bridge of his nose like he'd been hoping for a miracle, and got policy instead. In the hallway, he said, I'll pay half, before Melissa could pretend a brand makes money. She stared at the floor, then at the ceiling, then at nothing with a lot of effort. Fine, she managed. Back home, the neighborhood did what neighborhoods do when paperwork has cleared a path. Normalized decency. Mrs. Ortiz, 3 doors down, not the councilwoman, organized a salt and shovel rota. If your porch is icy, your promises slip, she announced, handing out scoopers like hymnals. Gina dropped off soup labeled Winter Rights and told me the trumpet kid had learned a minor key for days that needed it. I added a page to the paper is a door handout. Thermostat at night when it's cold. Time plus temp in one frame. Hitting the door hanger where the porch camera can read it. Mave a spare key to a neighbor who knows your middle name and your binder order. At dusk, Daniel knocked with a bag of salt and a face that had discovered verbs are heavier than opinions. I sprinkled the steps, he said. I labeled the fuse box. I put the ordinance copy on my fridge. And I'm looking at 1-bedrooms. He hesitated. Close. So I can bring groceries and not geometry. Bring verbs, I said. Groceries will follow. He nodded, then surprised me. Mom, the party wasn't we're at capacity. It was, I was embarrassed. She said, you make us look small. He looked at his hands. But our paperwork is. The thermometer wore 19 degrees Fahrenheit like a dare when the letter arrived. City letterhead, stapled promise, clipped verbs. Consent order, administrative resolution. Lydia read over my shoulder because she reads over everyone's shoulder. It's how librarians keep rooms honest. Terms as plain as salt, fines payable, training required, cold weather access, APS false reports, plus a line I liked more than I admit. 20 hours community service at the warming center within 30 days. A last page added by the chair in blue ink. Optional restorative statement, public. Apology to be read at warming center if parties agree. Optional, Lydia murmured. The best kind of mandatory. Ms. Patel called before the kettle finished. We can, if you want, keep it strictly punitive, she said. Or we can write a statement that lives in public. Paper behaves better when it knows it'll have to speak out loud. Public, I said. Cold taught us to stop whispering. Meanwhile, Inspector Kwan showed up with a caulk gun like a hymn. Weather stripping day, he announced. He sealed drafts that thought they were clever, checked the attic hatch, labeled a folder, heat, maintenance, and tucked it in my bookcase between orders and receipts. Emergencies prefer binders, he said, and Daniel nodded like a student who had finally decided to like the subject. In the afternoon, Officer Kinley delivered a stack of the new door hangers hot from the laminator Lydia refuses to return. We walked the block, me with a pocket of tangerines, Kinley with zip ties, Lydia with a clipboard and pen that writes like a metronome. We hung cards where bells can see them. We knocked where bells can't. If you see a coat and a lock at the same time, Kinley told every porch, call us. We now have standing to act. Winter is a law professor when it's given a microphone. At dock, relief sounds like rules when you've had a winter. The warming center sits in the gym where the varnish holds 6 decades of squeaks. Gina runs coffee like it's triage. Ruth organizes cots with a general's eye. The heater rattles like a faithful old truck. We arrived with a bag of socks and the paper Ms. Patel drafted from my yellow lines. Melissa stood at the front in a sweater that finally learned humility. Daniel stood beside her without performing it. Ruth rang the little bell Reyes had brought the pantry, polished, clapper wrapped so it only rings on purpose. We have a statement, she said, and the room did what rooms do when they are asked to carry truth. They held still. Melissa read. She read like someone who hears her own words for the first time. On a night below freezing, we said no room. We were wrong. We used embarrassment as a door. We were wrong. We confused our convenience with your safety. We were wrong. We will repair in public. We will finish our training. We will serve our hours. We will answer the door. We are sorry. No applause. A man on the far cot pulled his hat down and went back to sleep. A nurse poured coffee. Evelyn, who runs intake and knows every name, nodded once, the way people nod when you've earned exactly one nod. Daniel stepped forward without being called. "I let someone else make my verbs," he said. "Now I shovel and I listen. If your porch freezes, knock next door, mine." Afterward, Melissa wiped tables without captions. She learned a mop is a policy if you push it in a straight line. APS had sent the same worker from the first day, wool hat, warm eyes, clipboard. She checked off service initiated and murmured, "We're building a training. Cold plus control equals crime. We'll use your doorbell clip without." Evening settled soft for once. I sat with tea, watched the bell camera capture the only thing I want it to. Porch light on, snow making squares out of silence. Lydia texted a photo of her porch kit tucked by her door. Kinley texted a photo of a rookie learning where the thermostat clause lives. Kwan texted a photo of a new door hanger hung straight. Ruth texted a single word: warm. I wrote a line for the handout in case winter next year tries to forget us. Below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, no room is not culture. It's a charge. I slid it into Paper is a Door and left the binder slightly open so the house could breathe through the rules. The lock turned once, twice, like a heartbeat remembering its count. The lemon of the tangerine peel on my table made the room honest. The keys on their hook made a small, satisfied clink. We had not won a war. We had taught a season to mind its verbs. The storm came in sideways, snow like handfuls of salt thrown by a rude cook. The weather app gave it a name. I've lived long enough to know storms don't need them. What they need is verbs. By noon, the block had turned the color of receipts. Lydia texted the phone tree, "Porch kits out, door hangers front facing, check your elders." I set my kettle, laid out tangerines, and tucked the cold weather access ordinance, plain language guide, behind the glass of the hall frame like a winter saint. At 1, the bell camera blinked. Odette's granddaughter on my porch, cheeks raw, words clattering. "They won't let Grandma in," she panted. "Aunt says the house is full. Uncle said the pipes might freeze if she keeps the door open long." "Pipes don't freeze from decency," I said, grabbing my coat and the consent order copy with the line I love. "Owner may enter and exit at will." Lydia was already halfway across the street. The consent order had put Melissa on a clock, 20 hours of service, and storms like deadline. I watched her walk through the snow with Daniel, no sunglasses, no armor, a knit hat that finally learned its place. She didn't perform. She folded blankets. Daniel shoveled an alley into a walkway and learned how temperature turns 68 degrees Fahrenheit into a public promise. We turned the fellowship hall into a geography of decency. Ruth rang Kinley's polished pantry bell twice, on purpose, and the room found its volume. I stood at the coffee urn like a minor prophet and poured salvation into paper cups. Melissa wiped tables without captions. Kwan fixed a loose vent with a pocket screwdriver that had saved more lives than speeches. APS's wool hat arrived with a box of door hangers and a new line they'd added in bold. Below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, no room is elder endangerment. People read it and nodded, like they were memorizing a song they'd already heard in their bones. Mid-afternoon, the power flickered out, a kind of quiet that is not romantic when you are old. Generators coughed awake. Someone started a hymn, off-key. We did what rooms like ours do, counted heads, checked fingers, poured coffee, called names, filled bowls. Daniel came to my elbow with a jar of soup from his new place, radiator knocks like a polite neighbor, and whispered, "For later, when the adrenaline leaves." I took it
and felt my hands learn gratitude without applause. Celeste at Trust and Safety sent a text I didn't expect. Pop-up working. Host near you who tried, no owner on site, got flagged. Agents called. One account suspended for cold weather misrepresentation. We had cake, lemon. I wrote one line on my yellow pad for the handout. Algorithms can learn verbs too. Evening pulled up like a chair. Melissa finished her first shift and came over holding a bag of socks, no camera. "I'll be back at 6, she said. And Saturday. I scheduled it. She looked smaller and better. People who stop performing usually do. "Will you
Put Daniel's soup in the fridge between the tangerines and the lesson plans and slid a fresh page into paper Isidore. "In storms, policy is a blanket. Lay it over the room, not just the bed. If a door says no, let the ordinance answer first. Teach one young person where the binder lives." I added Daniel's new address under neighbors' numbers and circled it. He doesn't live here anymore. He belongs anyway. Before sleep, I stood in the hall and read the wall aloud. Title: Evidence. Law. Melissa's still frame has faded a little in the lamplight. The words haven't. I tapped each with 2 fingers like knocking on wood. Then I touched the door hanger and said, "Present." The house answered with its ship noises. Outside, the lemon tree wore a cap of snow and still found a way to tap the window. Polite, insistent. A witness even in weather. They said there was no room. We made room bigger than a room. Tomorrow, the warming center will need dishwashers. Melissa will come back because paper told her to, and habit will tell her again. Kinley will hang 3 more cards. Kwan will fix a draft we didn't respect. Lydia will rest her pen. I will refill the porch kit and set 2 cups for whoever knocks next. Winter sharpened our verbs. We're keeping them. By morning, the storm had sulked itself out, leaving the street the color of receipts and the air the temperature of truth. I boiled water, set 2 cups, habit, and straightened the frame in the hall where I keep my winter saints. Title: Evidence. Law. Ordinance. The door hanger swayed once, as if clearing its throat. Paper arrived first. Miss Patel slid an envelope under my door. Service log, warming center. Melissa, 6 hours completed. Signed by Ruth and countersigned by APS's wool hat. Daniel, volunteer, shovel and intake, not court-ordered, which is the kind that counts double. A sticky note in Nia's hand. Consent order obligations on track. Keep the receipt. Banner live across platforms. Below 32 degrees Fahrenheit. Save clip. Elders have access rights. A screenshot followed. A little gray bar under doorbell feeds. Save for elder access dispute, with a 1-click upload to a folder labeled Kinley. We're giving agents a button that says Call Precinct instead of Archive, she wrote. Cake was excellent. Afternoon brought the precinct briefing. Kinley handed me a copy like a program at a concert I actually wanted to attend. Winter lockout protocol, in bold. Bullet points that knew their jobs. Confirm temperature. Request door opened. Cite ordinance. If denied, compel. Log thermostat. Preserve doorbell footage. Note malicious report referral to APS. Rookies love scripts, he said. Winter loves rookies who read. Gina sent soup to the warming center with a note that read, "No apology frosting," and a winking lemon. She's been listening. Around 3, Melissa knocked, with gloves, without sunglasses. "Our side," she said, holding out the sheet like it might bite. "I go back Saturday." She hesitated. There's a line at intake now. Below 32, no room is endangerment. I heard a woman reading it under her breath. She looked like someone who had stumbled into a hymn and recognized the tune. "I'll bring coffee." "Bring verbs," I said. "Coffee is a noun." She almost smiled, almost, and left before she said something that would make the day forget itself. At 4, the administrative hearing. Payment confirmation email landed. Fines paid. Another attachment. Training certificates. Cold weather access. APS false reports. Plus egress basics because Quan insists. I printed and tucked them into orders. Permanent. Then added a new sleeve I labeled Repair. Proof. Paper is a door. Sometimes it's also a path back across the threshold. Evening light. Pastor Ruth blessed the thermostat clause like it could understand English. I think it did. A young woman, 20 maybe, hovered by my table where the yellow "paper is a door" handouts lived. My uncle says Grandma can visit the laundry room when company comes, she whispered, ashamed of a sentence that had learned to dress itself. I pushed a handout across, pointed at the bottom where I'd added a new line this week. Below 32 degrees Fahrenheit, no room is not culture, it's a charge. Teach your house that, I said, then write it on his fridge. She laughed, surprised to be allowed, and took two. Back home, I set my porch kit by the door, straightened the door hanger, and checked the bell camera. A bare porch, a calm street, a lemon tree shaking off ice like a dog. The house made its ship noises. My keys settled on their hook like a chorus finding the right note. A plain envelope slid under my door at dusk. Melissa's handwriting again, smaller. Inside, I finished 8 hours. I'll finish the rest. I won't fight the ordinance anymore. If you need salt carried, text me. M. I wrote back on the same page under her line, finish, then keep showing up when there isn't an order. Thursdays at the pantry. Bring a broom that knows edges. I slid it under her door and let the hallway keep our truce on file. Before bed, I added 2 lines to Paper is a Door. Teach the algorithm a verb. It will teach a clerk a rule. Hang one thing in your hall that tells the truth even when you're tired. I looked at my wall. Title. Evidence. Law. Ordinance. The still of no room had faded to a warning the color of old tea. The bold on owner may enter and exit at will had not dimmed. Winter had not made us kind. We already were. It made us efficient. Tomorrow, Daniel will move to the 1-bedroom with the polite radiator. I will put his spare key on my corkboard under when to call me. A letter from a landlord association, stationary with opinions, announcing they'd be seeking relief from the cold weather access ordinance. Overbroad, burdensome, chills commerce. Ms. Patel read it, didn't sigh. They'll try a temporary injunction, she said. We'll bring data and verbs. We did. A chilly courtroom with a judge whose eyebrows are more expressive than most speeches. The association talked about takings and nanny states. Quan testified like a man who loves inches. Emergency calls down 18% in the cold snap. Egress requests up 41. Door hangers on 212 porches. APS reported malicious winter reports flagged and deterred. Kinley brought 2 rookies and a stack of incident logs. Below 32, doors opened in under 4 minutes when cited. No injuries. Celeste appeared on a screen and said the sentence I liked best. Our cold weather flag escalated 5 misrepresentations in your county. Hosts suspended. Guests relocated. Training completed. Cake consumed. The judge polished his glasses with a handkerchief that's seen worse winters. The ordinance keeps people alive, he said. Injunction denied. He added a line to his order you could hang above a thermostat. Public safety is not a mood. Lydia underlined it 3 times in my copy like a woman blessing a verse. The week turned into a ledger of small, right things. The Winterize Fair tallied out. 238 door hangers laminated, 43 porch kits placed, 17 egress applications started, a dozen grandsons taught to shovel like it's not theater. Ruth kept count with beans in a jar so we could hear progress, not just read it. A landlord on Birch tried to get clever. Eco mode down to 60 at midnight. Kinley knocked, showed the ordinance, took a photo of the smart thermostat with time and temp in one frame, and wrote "comply" on his pad like a gavel.
Councilwoman Ortiz launched a Landlord 101 Winter Rights webinar from our fellowship hall. Kwan taught thermostats. APS taught false report penalties. Kinley taught rookies how to talk like a rail, not a fence. I read 2 minutes from the yellow handout. Below 32, no room is a charge. People typed Amen in the chat, which is how cities pray. Celeste emailed a screenshot of a new internal slide titled MAE's Rule. If forecast Lethern 32 degrees Fahrenheit and owner on site conflicts with listing, escalate. I sent her lemon bars by certified mail. The return receipt came back frosting stained. Proof of life. Lydia unveiled the porch registry, a small, stubborn spreadsheet taped inside my entry, also at Ruth's, also at Kwan's desk. Elders on our block. Key holders. Doorbell access. Binder location. Paper that tells a room where the verbs live. We added Odette's niece with a note. Learned fast. Calls first. Brings soup. Some reparations come in quart jars. On Friday night, the cold tried one more test. Pipes like tin clarinets. Sky like old glass. We watched from our benches. Mine under the lemon tree, Lydia's with Harold's Afghan, as the block ran its quiet drill. Salt on steps. Lights on porches. Door hangers facing out like little saints. Somewhere a trumpet found the clean note and held it long enough to be believed. Inside, I straightened my hall wall. Title, evidence, law, ordinance. The still of no room has faded to something like a cautionary tea stain. The bold on owner may enter and exit at will is still thick enough to touch. I added a small brass plate below, the size of a doorbell. Below 32, access is a verb. Ms. Patel texted, "County kept our ordinance, injunction denied. Clinics adding winter rights to intake." Not a threat, not a poem, a policy in brass. We set the level, drilled straight, and tightened until metal met wood the way a sentence meets its period. Neighbors clapped once, then twice, then stopped. Because benches don't like noise unless it's useful. The trumpet kid tried a flourish and landed it. Mrs. Ortiz handed out paper cups of heat. Gino whisked in a pie and a wink. Kinley took a photo for the precinct board. Kwan took one for his binder labeled Good Decisions. Inside, I straightened my hall wall. Title, evidence, law, ordinance. Below the brass plate I'd added last night, below 32, access is a verb, I tucked one more page, not laminated, just true. If you're cold and the door says no, ring. We will answer. Ms. Patel sent a message that felt like a hand on my shoulder. County adopted the ordinance, injunction denied. Clinics added winter rights to their intake packet. She attached a photo from a far side of the state, another hallway, another deed taped up, another door hanger swinging the right way. Paper travels faster than apologies when you teach it verbs. Daniel walked me through his place, radiator knocking like a gentleman who remembered to bring flowers, fuse box labeled like it wanted to be praised. On the inside of his front closet door he'd taped our ordinance and, under it, a copied line in his careful hand. Owner may enter and exit at will. He touched the page like a pledge. It reminds me to be the person who doesn't need the reminder, he said, and I let that be the blessing it was.
Melissa kept showing up where paper told her to, and then where no paper did. She folded cots, wiped tables, learned names without turning them into captions. She still looked at me like a courthouse sometimes, respectful, wary. But she looked at the door like a promise, and that was new. On her last required shift, she left a note on the intake table. Ruth rang the little pantry bell, the one with the wrapped clapper that only rings on purpose, and asked me to stand for 2 minutes. I don't like microphones. I like verbs. I read the new page I'd added to Paper is a Door. Hospitality is compliance. To your door a sentence, it will teach your house a habit. One line you can see from the porch when your courage feels small. I didn't cry. I have learned when tears help and when they smear. People nodded. Someone said amen, like a nod that needed a sound. By February's first mercy, the snow had receded into corners and promises. The Landlord Association sent another letter, this time pretending it had always supported the ordinance. We filed it in evidence, predators, retired, and served pie to celebrate restraint. One night, late, the bell camera blinked and caught only what I wanted to catch most nights, a porch light doing its job. No coats, no chains. The door hanger swayed once, twice. Roll call. Present. I made tea, set 2 cups out of habit and hope. The lemon tree, free of its cap of snow, tapped the glass once like a judge finishing a case she can finally stop thinking about. My keys clinked on their hook with the satisfaction of metal that has learned its owner's name. Before bed, I walked the house, upstairs to see Miss Flores's lamp glowing the right kind of warm, downstairs to sit beneath my window where the world makes sense through glass. I put my palm on the bench plaque one more time. Room enough, open the door. And on the brass words in my hall, below 32, access is a verb. And on the thin black letters I copied from my husband's oldest letter and taped inside the pantry, where only I can see, check the door frame before you apologize for existing. I did. I found a camera meant for memory. I found neighbors who still keep the kind of anger that rescues. I found a city that can be taught and an algorithm